Here's a question for the panel. Are we New Testament Christians? Would you say yes or no? Like, are we under the new covenant?
We're under the new covenant. Yep.
We're under the new covenant, right? We're not under the old covenant. We're under the new covenant, right? Check this out. And I think most people say, and most people agree, we're New Testament Christians. And that doesn't mean that we only just read the New Testament, but as far as the covenant that's made, we're under the new covenant. Now, I'm going to just share this. Who was the new covenant made with? Jeremiah. Let's look at Jeremiah. Is it 31, verse 30? I don't know this. 31, verse 31.
By the way, critics really want to live under the new covenant. All right.
Yeah, I agree. We're New Covenant Christians.
Yeah.
This is what the Old Testament says.
For a good reason, because we are New Covenant Christians. Go ahead.
We are New Covenant Christians. Here's what the Bible says. Behold, the days cometh, saith the Lord, that I will make, here it goes, a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah. Not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day that I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt, which my covenant they break, although I was a husband unto them, saith the Lord. But this shall be the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, saith the Lord. Now, what's the new covenant, guys? Here it is. Here's what God says. I will put my, what's that word?
Law.
I'll put my law in their inward parts and write it in their hearts, and will be their God, and they shall be my people. Right? So this is the new covenant. That God is saying the new covenant that I'm going to make specifically with the house of Israel, the Jews, and Judah. The new covenant is God putting his law in our hearts. Now, if we say that we are New Covenant Christians, and we should say that if we believe in Jesus Christ, we are New Covenant Christians. That means we're saying that God is putting his law in our hearts and in our minds, right? So what law was God talking about in this verse? There was only one moral law in the Old Testament, the 10 Commandments. And of course, there was the ceremonial laws as well. But the law of God, that included the seventh-day Sabbath. Let's go to Hebrews, the New Testament, to see the confirmation. Hebrews chapter 8, it says this in verse 10. Sorry, not verse 10. So verse 7, verse 6, it says this. But now he hath obtained a more excellent ministry, by how much also he is the mediator of a better covenant, which was established upon better promises. For if the first covenant had not been faultless, then should no place have been sought for the second. For finding fault with them, he saith, Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah, not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day when I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Egypt, because they continued out of my covenant, and I regarded them not, saith the Lord. Verse 10, for this is the new covenant. This is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, saith the Lord. I will put my laws into their mind and write them in their hearts, and I will be to them a God, and they shall be to me a people. Right? It goes on, you may read, and it goes on, it says, in this he saith a new covenant that he made the first old. Now that which decayeth and wax old is ready to vanish away. The new covenant, we're under the new covenant. And the new covenant is God saying, I will put my laws in their hearts. And what he's saying is that he made that covenant with the house of Israel. Edwin, right. Can you give me like 1 more minute to just break down the house of Israel?
Go ahead.
I'll be quick. I promise I'll be quick. All right. But then we say, oh, that new covenant is made with the house of Israel. Well, the question then is, who is the real Israel? Let me just break that down real quick. I'll give you 3 verses, and then I'm done. And then Edwin, you can take over. It says this. Oh goodness, where is that verse? And help me find it, guys. Where does it say, Israel is my son, even my firstborn? Anybody remember that verse?
Isn't that Hosea?
Yeah, but it's also in Exodus. I just want to establish that real quick. Give me 2 seconds.
Exodus 4:22.
Thank you. I was 1 verse away. Thanks. Yep. You see, Deontay, that's why you my guy. It says this, and thou shalt say unto Pharaoh, thus saith the Lord, Israel is my son, even my firstborn. Point number one, God is calling Israel his firstborn son. Point number two, Hosea chapter 11. Randy's
Yep.
reading my mind. Stop reading my mind, Randy. Let me find Hosea. Where's Hosea? There it is. Hosea
After
chapter
Daniel.
11. Yep, thank you. When Israel was a child, then I loved him and called my son out of Egypt. So, point number one, Israel is God's firstborn son. Point number two, Israel was called out of Egypt. Last point, Matthew 2, verse 15 says this. This is the time when Jesus was taken out because Herod was trying to kill everybody under the age of 2. It says, verse 14, when he arose, he took the young child and his mother by night, talking about Jesus, and departed into Egypt, and was there until the death of Herod, that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken of the Lord by the prophet, saying, out of Egypt I have called my son. What the Bible is saying is that the real Israel, and there's many more verses I can show you, but the real Israel is Jesus Christ himself. And so if we are baptized into Christ, we are Abraham's seed. Jesus is the fulfillment of Israel. When we are calling ourselves New Testament Christians, we're accepting Christ as Israel, and we are grafted in. If you read Romans chapter 11, I believe it is, it says we are grafted into Israel, that all the commandments that pertain to them are what we're saying we do. So if you're calling yourself a New Testament Christian, what you're saying is, God is putting his law, which includes the Sabbath, in our hearts and in our mind. So yeah, and I have many more verses to say, but if you're a New Testament Christian, you are saying the law of God is written in my mind and in my heart, and I'm accepting that. And that would include the fourth commandment, which is the Sabbath commandment.
Thank you, brother. Let me share a couple of thoughts to reinforce a little bit of what you said, because there's some questions coming in regards to Isaiah 56 that Deontay had brought up, and some of the text that you brought up, Jason. So I wanted to kind of reinforce and add to it and answer these questions as well. Could you pull up for me Deuteronomy 4:13? Deuteronomy 4:13 says, and he declared unto you his covenant, which he commanded you to perform, even 10 commandments, right? When we read in the new covenant in Jeremiah 33 that the new covenant is placing the law in the heart, well, if the previous covenant was 10 commandments numerically, then when the law that's being placed in the heart is numerically the same, it's also 10. It's not 9 commandments. Nowhere in the Bible, in the New Testament or Old, does it say that God would write 9 commandments in the heart, in the heart of individuals. Under the New Covenant, it's the law of God, the 10 commandments that was written in the heart. And I think what happens, because the text says in Jeremiah 33, not like the one I made with your fathers, right? If you can go to that text real quick in Jeremiah 33.
You mean Jeremiah 31, verse 33?
Yeah, 31, 33, pardon. Where it says, not like the one I made with them. When we study the covenant that God made with them, there's certain aspects to it. It wasn't just the contents, which was the 10 commandments, but it was also the agreement for them to keep the 10 commandments, right? You recall when they said, all that the Lord hath said, we will do. You remember that?
Yeah.
When that was a part of the contract as well. So I'm in real estate, right? And in real estate, and I'm also I was in insurances, so I know a little bit about this, the legality of this. But in a contract, in a covenant, you have not just the contents that's written in the contract so that you can have the mortgage of this house between you and the bank, but there's also the agreement where you're signing off, right? Hebrews chapter 9 says, for finding fault with them, I think it's chapter 8 actually, the problem was not the 10 commandments, the problem was the people. They broke their side of the covenant, right? They were the problem, not the law of God. Paul says the law is holy, just, and good. He's talking about the 10 commandments in Romans 7 because he quotes the 10th one. The problem was not the law. The problem was the people. So what does God do? God takes the law and says, okay, here's what's going to happen now. You obviously can't write it in your own heart. You're not doing it. I'm going to do the work for you, and I'm going to write it in your heart. So God now takes the law. He writes it in the heart, and now it becomes a natural thing for us while abiding in Christ to obey God's commandments. Why do I say that? Because the typical verse that critics like to use against the 10 commandments is 2 Corinthians chapter 3. We could do a whole study on that when we do a live stream about the 10 commandments specifically. But in that chapter, 2 Corinthians chapter 3, it talks about the new covenant. Paul talks about the new covenant. But interestingly enough, he references the tablets of stone. Within the context of the new covenant, referencing the tablets of stone, we just ask ourselves how many laws were written on the tablets of stone. It was 10 commandments, not 9 commandments. So under the new covenant, what we have there is 10 commandments. That was the basis of the covenant made previously, now in the heart of the individual. So when it says, not like I made with them, right, in the past, it doesn't mean that it's now 9. It doesn't go from 10 to 9. It doesn't shrink. God is not subtracting one commandment. That's not what it's talking about. It's the problem contextually is that they could not do it themselves. And so since they said all that the Lord has said we will do, and they did not do it because they couldn't, God is saying, I'm going to do it now. And that's why the Corinthians, God speaks of them, Paul speaks of them in 2 Corinthians chapter 3 as living epistles. They live the law of God. It shows. People see it in them because they are living the law of God written in their hearts. Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
I wanted to also, backtracking to something Deontay said, and then I'll leave the floor to you guys. I'm going to share a screenshot here that just something I think is interesting as well. In regards to Isaiah 56. This is another PowerPoint presentation I can share with you guys. If anybody wants it, send me an email. I'll send it to you for free. But there's a real neat parallel taking place in Isaiah, in the book of Isaiah. Some people call Isaiah the mini gospel. Why? Here's why.
Powerful.
Because what you're seeing between Isaiah 53, and you can go further back, but I just did this PowerPoint from Isaiah 53 to Isaiah 56. You see a clear parallel between everything taking place in the New Testament. And incidentally, what you're finding in Isaiah 56, there's a parallel there between the Gentiles who accept the new covenant in the New Testament, and lo and behold, we find them doing exactly that. The book of Acts, we find them congregating on the Sabbath. We find them obeying God's Sabbath and God's commandments in the New Testament. So what we're seeing here is a very neat parallel between the two. The reason why I'm saying that is because people say, well, Isaiah 56, the Gentiles had to keep the old covenant, like they had to sacrifice and things of that nature, which Isaiah 56 talks about as well, right? But what I believe Isaiah is talking about is new covenant Sabbath keeping, right? So the sacrifices there would be new covenant sacrifices, like the sacrifices of praise, sacrifices of bringing people to the Lord, things of that nature. So what we're seeing here is a clear parallel between prophetically in Isaiah and the fulfillment of what we find in the New Testament. Does that make sense to everybody?
Clear.